Welcome to Days at Dogwood Canyon, a nature podcast brought to you by Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center in Cedar Hill, Texas. This is a podcast that will take you into our 200-acre wildlife preserve in the heart of the DFW Metroplex. Take a quick weekly break with us and get outside with the fresh air, the trees, and of course, the birds. My name is Kirsten, and I'm Center Coordinator Community Programs here at Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center. Welcome, listeners, to our Days at Dogwood Canyon podcast. This is a podcast about nature, birds, plants, and us. We will talk about how we all rely on each other to live our best lives. When someone says the word farm, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Corn, fruits, cows, maybe even a barn? The first thing you think about is probably not conservation. But today we're going to talk about the Farm Bill and how this bill allows farms and bird conservation to live in harmony. First things first, what is the Farm Bill? The Farm Bill was first created and passed by the federal government in 1933. This was in the aftermath of the Great Depression and during the height of the Dust Bowl. During the Great Depression, farmers kept producing products to keep up with the famine all Americans in the United States were facing. The problem was that consumers didn't have the money to buy what the farmers were growing. Enter the U.S.Farm Bill. The government drafted a bill to help farmers by paying them to produce less and buying their surplus to feed hungry Americans. This was the first of 18 U.S. farm bills that pledged to help farmers and impoverished citizens to survive. Approximately every 5 years or so, the bill is revisited and revised to keep up with the changing economy and increasing human populations. This bill addresses funding for nutrition, crop insurance, conservation, and commodities. The bill passed in 2018 set aside funding for some excellent bird conservation. Julie Grogan-Brown, Audubon's Working Lands Policy Manager, said in the 2018 summer edition of Audubon magazine, quote, "You have to work with private landowners to be successful when you're talking about bird habitat. And the Farm Bill is really the federal mechanism for working directly with landowners." End quote. The 2018 version of the Farm Bill set aside 6.8% of its funding for conservation efforts. The Conservation Reserve Program, first established in 1985's version of the Farm Bill, recognized the importance of allowing soil to recover after long periods of farming. Farmers were paid to leave portions of their lands fallow. This action saves soil, protects rivers, streams, and drinking water, and it enhances biodiversity and functions as a form of supply management. Okay, so now that we know what the U.S. Farm Bill does, let's look at some of the specific species of birds that this legislation protects. Through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, the black-necked stilt habitat is getting a new look with the help of Audubon, California, and the California Rice Commission. That's right, I said Rice Commission. Who knew that rice and birds could help each other? With the Farm Bill in place, Audubon, California was able to approach privately owned rice fields. The black-necked stilt is a water bird that relies heavily on wetlands and shallow lakes to survive. These birds have super long reddish-pink legs, a lovely black and white coloration, and a long black beak that is perfect for poking around in the mud for small invertebrates. So how is Audubon, California and the Farm Bill helping this awesome bird? Well, 90% of wetlands in California's Central Valley were drained for farming and development. This devastated the habitat for the black-necked stilt. So returning some of that habitat to this bird is essential. So Audubon, California and the California Rice Commission are working with rice farmers to allow floodwaters that come into the valley seasonally to sit longer. Allowing the water to remain in rice fields longer than they typically do follows historic farming practices and gives the stilts a longer period of time to eat. Research is still ongoing, but we know that allowing the water to stay in the fields has attracted more than 3 times the amount of shorebirds per acre to this area. We may also discover that allowing the water to remain longer can improve the health of the rice fields. We'll just have to wait and see. Our next bird example is the Henslow's sparrow. Henslow's sparrow is found in the eastern portion of the United States and the Gulf of Mexico region, from Texas to Florida. They are a beautiful brown and speckled bird that the Farm Bill gave a much-needed break. This sparrow traditionally uses grasslands to reproduce, and many of these areas were plowed under to create more farmland. In 1985, the Conservation Reserve Program was created, which pays farmers to temporarily plant a portion of their land with native plants, including grasses. This stopped the 8% annual decline in the Henslow's sparrow population and moved it from endangered to near threatened on the IUCN Red List. That is a great improvement. According to Jim Herkert, Illinois Audubon Society's executive director, when speaking about the Henslow's sparrow population rebound, quote, "It's almost entirely driven by the CRP," unquote. This sparrow is now 10 times more popular in Illinois than it was in 1980s, and their numbers increased 3 times faster in areas that are enrolled in the Conservation Reserve Program. Way to go, Farm Bill! Our next example is a bird that has been given a helping hand from the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, included in the U.S.Farm Bill. The wood stork is a large, majestic bird that relies on wetlands and is found throughout Florida year-round. Much of the wetlands in Florida have been drained and repurposed for human use. A century ago, 100,000 wood storks nested near the Audubon Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary in the western Everglades. In 2018, only 400 pairs were nesting in the area. This is a huge decrease in population, but the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program that pays farmers to restore a portion of their land is increasing the amount of available wetlands for the wood storks to breed. In 2024, an estimated 10,000 to 12,000 nesting pairs have been counted in Florida. That's an amazingly good increase. Our last example of how the U.S. Farm Bill is helping birds is the northern bobwhite. This is a species of quail with short gray legs, a chubby brown and white body, and a small hooked beak. They are found year-round in the eastern portion of the United States from Texas to the coast, and this is the only native quail in the eastern United States. Bobwhites rely heavily on forest edges with connecting grasslands. So habitat destruction has caused a severe decline to bobwhite numbers since 1967. Conservationists couldn't set aside enough public lands to head off this decline or even stabilize it. So they turned to the Working Lands for Wildlife program created in 2012 as part of the U.S. Farm Bill. Now, conservationists could work directly with private landowners to restore the habitat that bobwhite need. This is still an ongoing effort, but if it's done right, scientists and conservationists with the National Bobwhite Conservation Initiative believe that we can increase the bobwhite population by 55 million. That's a whole lot of cute little quail. If these examples don't have you sold on the importance of conservation and the Farm Bill, I have a few more facts to consider. There are 1.2 billion acres of private farms, ranches, and forests throughout the country, and 23.8 million acres of this land is enrolled in the Conservation Reserve Program. 1 million acres of prairie chicken land has been protected via the Working Lands for Wildlife program, and 2 million additional ducks have hatched annually in the Prairie Pothole region thanks to the Conservation Reserve Program. It's commonly thought that conservationists and farmers cannot work together successfully, but these 4 examples prove that we can all get along with benefits for all. And as National Audubon says, what's good for birds is good for people.